I've been a homeowner for about 10 years now, and I wanted to share a few things, a few lessons learned in my homeownership journey for the past 10 years. Now, I know a lot of you that watch this channel are either first-time home buyers, new Canadians, or people that are just looking to transition from, condo to a single house, whatever that looks like for you. I know you are going to learn a few things from watching this video. So let's go into it right away. The very first thing you definitely want to have before you buy a house as much as possible is to have an emergency fund. Let me give you an example. So last week, in the middle of the night, our fridge decides to start beeping and making so much noise, woke everybody in the house up except my baby, thank God. The fridge just woke up and chose violence. What happened? The fridge is about 15 years old and it has just decided to stop working. I've spent about $500 in repairs so far, and that was my cap. I'm like, I'm not doing anything more than $500 because it's no longer worth it. I might as well just go buy a new one. So lo and behold, last week I had to go buy a new fridge, and that cost what, $1,700, almost $1,800 right there and then. Okay, having an emergency fund turned that issue into an inconvenience instead of an emergency. In addition to buying the new fridge, I had to buy a mini fridge that's going to help us coast until the new fridge can be delivered. Okay, all in all, I'm talking about $2,000 here. Okay, having an emergency fund turned that situation into an inconvenience instead of an emergency. Now, you may think, oh, what's the big deal? Not having a fridge is massive. Like, I didn't realize how much having a fridge is actually a thing until you don't have it. Okay, so anyways, the very first lesson is you want to make sure you have an emergency fund because life comes at you fast, especially when you're a homeowner. Number two, don't buy too much house. Okay, I know a lot of personal finance gurus talk about this all the time. Do not buy too much house. They are going to pre-qualify you for something you cannot afford. So for example, if most times they pre-qualify you for amounts before taxes, unless you live under a rock in Canada, even when you live under a rock, you're paying taxes for sure. Okay, so you want to make sure you don't buy too much house. They pre-qualified you for $1 million house. Does not mean you can afford $1 million house. You have to know your budget. You have to know what you can afford for utilities. You have to know that, okay, after I'm done paying all my house expenses with the price at say $1 million, what is that going to leave me to be able to save for my children's future, save for my future, take advantage of opportunities that come down the road. Okay, so just because you are qualified for X amount does not mean you should buy X amount. Buy the amount that makes sure that gives you the ability to still be able to save for the future, travel, do other things that having a life requires. Okay, number three, don't wait until you have 20%. Now, I know there's some gurus out there that say don't buy a house until you have 20%. Unfortunately, I personally don't buy into that idea. I think what we did was we entered at 5%, okay, and then we paid extra on the mortgage to get us to the 20% mark, but we were already in the property, okay, so that by the time the renewal came through for the property, we were already at that 20% point. Okay, if I had decided to wait till I had 20% saved up before entering the house, I wouldn't have been able to afford the house anymore, just with the way the markets have gone. So if the moment you have your 5% and you can afford it, your other numbers make sense, get into the house and then use whatever extra cash flow you have to pay down on the mortgage to get you to that 20% point. Number four, home ownership is still possible in this day and age. I know there's a lot of rhetoric, there's a lot of talk out there about, oh, home ownership is out of reach for the millennial, for the Gen Z, for the blah, blah, blah. Now, are they talking based on fact? Yes, but don't get sucked into that. Don't get sucked into that lie. Don't get sucked into that mentality that, oh, I'm not going to be able to buy a house. I'm not going to be able to do this. I'm not going to be able to do that. Even I started working right in the middle of the economic downturn. I graduated at the peak of the recession that year. Anyways, why am I saying all this? It is still possible so long as you believe it's possible. If you believe you can't or you believe you can't, you are probably right. But you have to determine what you choose to believe, okay? Home ownership is still possible and it's still happening in this day and age. So try as much as possible not to get sucked into that narrative that, oh, home ownership is out of reach for a lot of people. Now, I don't deny that it is. But what I'm saying is you don't get sucked into that narrative, okay? Because if you believe it can happen for you, guess what? It will happen for you, okay? The next thing, make sure you start small. We started small. For example, you don't have to start small if you have the money to start big. What I'm saying is if you don't have the money to start big, what worked for us back then 10 years ago was we got into a condo, and then from the condo we evolved, and when we got into a standalone house. Okay, now that may be different in this day and age. I don't know what condos are doing. I did not like owning a condo. I do not want to be a condo owner anymore. If that's what you want to do, make sure you do your research and find out, okay, how can I get into the market by starting small? Okay, what is it that I can do in this market, even if it's, maybe it's fractional ownership? I'm not suggesting that you do that. I'm just saying, find out what works in this day and age, do it, and get yourself started on that home ownership journey. Okay, and then of course, when you can afford it, the last lesson is, when you can afford it, do buy a bigger house. One of the things that I personally think we should have done was, when we were qualified, for example, for the house we're currently in, we could have bought a bigger house that would have been able to take more of us now, especially now that our family is expanding. But at the time I was like, it's only 2 of us, we don't need the space, blah 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 blah. But I wish I had a little more foresight when we're buying our current house, because then that means I won't currently be looking for a house, because I will be very okay. So anyways, those are some of the lessons I've learned in being a homeowner for 10 years. I really encourage you all. Homeownership is not out of reach. Please do not get sucked into that lie, or sucked into that mentality that it cannot happen for you. It can, and it will happen for you, so long as you believe it can. Okay, thank you so much, and see you in the next video.